At the beginning of the story, we see a black-haired girl who wakes up and prepares to go to school, but when she opens the door, she sees many reporters in her mind for a moment, which shocks her. She leaves with her personal driver and we notice a car that is strangely parked behind her house. At school, everyone respected her except one person, Kajinu, a boy who even calls her name Nishimura by mistake. That girl says to herself, "You were sitting next to me for the last 3 months, how could you not know my name?" Kajinu says, "Oh, you were a named NPC, sorry, Nishitan." That was wrong again. Nishino says to herself that this boy is always looking somewhere far away as if he is never here. In the class, we learn that Akane Nishino is a famous actress whom everyone knows and loves. We also see Kajinu exercising in class. Akane says to herself, "After that scandal when I was 12 years old, I always have to hide myself behind a mask." Kajinu keeps getting weirder. In the yard, we see him reading a notebook that is something like magic training. And he talks to himself about the nuclear bomb and says more power. In the next scene, while Kajinu is playing the piano, we see scenes where people are hitting Akane's driver. Akane calls her driver, but he doesn't answer, so she decides to go home on foot. Akane says to herself that she has never walked home since that incident when suddenly a big man walks in front of her. Akane runs and says no again. A car turns in front of him and steals him. In those last moments, she sees Kajinu standing at the end of the alley. Akane opens her eyes while her hands and mouth are closed, and the kidnapper tells her, "You should know that the eldest daughter of Zabatsu Nishio should not go anywhere alone," and the other kidnapper tells him, "Don't do anything, they will give you the money soon and you are free to go," and the two of them start to argue with each other. At this moment, we see Kajinu outside the door. A moment later, the kidnapper goes forward and says, "It must be a repeat for you, you have been robbed before, it's better not to resist." And he tries to rape her. At this moment, Kajinu comes and introduces himself as Stylish Ruffian Slayer. And in one move, it disables the first kidnapper. That one kidnapper drops his weapon and happily says, "Finally, a good opponent. Ever since I was thrown out of the army, I was bored." He injures Kajinu a bit, but Kajinu takes off his crowbars and says, "You haven't learned the true potential of this weapon yet. I use this weapon every night to treat stupid motorcyclists, you are nothing." And the kidnapper just realized that Kajinu is the masked madman that all the motorcyclists are afraid of, but it's too late. Kajinu unties Akane's hands and feet and says to himself, "It is not good for me to be wounded like this by a soldier," and leaves. Akane does not understand the Kajinu's identity and calls the police, and her father makes sure that the news of this incident does not leak anywhere. The next day, Akane goes to school like any other day, but when she sees Kajinu, this time Kajinu says her name correctly. And she says to herself, "This time it's like he's not somewhere far away and his eyes are looking at me. I feel like he's living behind a mask like me." But there is no way to be sure of it. And we see that the news is saying that Kajinu crashed with a truck and lost his life. And the credits are played, but after the credits, we hear Kagno's voice saying to himself, "I always wanted to be a hero like other kids since I was a child, but this wish was something other than a momentary excitement." Kajinu had mastered every skill and had done everything necessary to become stronger, but there was a problem. He could learn all the martial arts in the world, but the human body is limited and cannot become invincible like the heroes of the stories. Maybe he can hit even a few armed soldiers, but if they hit him with a nuclear bomb, for example, he has no chance. He wants to become as strong as possible. And in the next scene, we see him in old London, while he has formed a group wearing black, and the people of that group are admiring his subtlety and saying, "We are waiting for your order, sir." We hear Kongo's voice saying, "I don't know what this is, but I know that a new life has been given to me. I have been given magic. I want more power. I don't want to be a hero or a giant of the last stage, I want to be the one who fights in the shadows and shows his power to others." The Eminence in shadow. In the next scene, we see Kajinu on the roof of a palace while saying to himself, "I don't remember how it started, but this is what I always wanted." At that moment, a blonde-haired girl arrives and says, "It was as you said." In the ancient texts, explanations were written about the Diablo's cult, as if the more we learn about them, the more we understand how strong they are. Kajinu answers, "We lurk in the shadows and fight with the shadows." By saying this sentence, that girl's mind will be relieved. Kajinu says to himself, "This elf is very obedient." Back to the present. Kajinu reincarnated into the body of a small child after his accident. His new parents are suspicious of why he is not crying, but he understands that he has to play a role and starts crying. At this moment, he feels that the environment is filled with magical energy and he is happy that he can get this power in this world. He is the second child of a noble family that trained dark knights for generations, but Kajinu is not the heir of this family, and his older sister, who looks a lot like Akane from his previous life, is the main heir. Kajinu played the role of the weak brother and secretly went on various missions and fought bandits with his sword and slime suit. In one of his missions, he finds a strange creature inside the bandits' hideouts and decides to do some experiments to find out what is the reason for the magical power he feels from it. And after a month, he finally managed to neutralize the effect of possession that was on him. What he encountered was a beautiful girl. He decided to brainwash this girl. As soon as she woke up, he said to her, "You are free now. I saved you from your curse. The curse that was executed on you and the rest of the descendants of the heroes. You must have heard about the famous story of 3 heroes who defeated Diablos. Well, that is a true story, and the devil recited a spell with his last breath that turned you into that creature. Someone manipulated the history and called you possessed." The blonde girl asks who did this. And Kajinu answers, "The Diablos sect, a group that wants to resurrect the great devil. My mission is to stay in the shadows and fight them. My name is Stylish, oh sorry, Shadow. Child of the hero, will you accompany me on this path?" She answers, "I was destined to die as a monster and you saved me. I give my life for you." Kajinu gives her his slime suit and says, "I made up all this story. We are probably fighting with government leaders." And she answers, "We will not show mercy to anyone who stands in our way. We will gather the children of heroes and expand our organization." And Kajinu says, "Okay, so the name of our group will be Shadow Garden, and you will be called Alpha from now on." 3 years have passed since that day. Kajinu has high swordsmanship skills, but he never shows his skills. Kajinu says to himself, "If I want to prepare for that day, I have to act like that." When the nobles turn 15 years old, they go to the Black Knights Academy of Midgar, and it is the turn of Kajinu's sister to go to this academy, but exactly on the day that these events should happen, she mysteriously disappears. Shadow, who now has 7 members in his group, realizes that the kidnappers think that his sister is one of the children of the heroes, and he goes to save her. His sister, Claire, is tied with an anti-magic chain, and the leader of the bandits tries to hit her, and Claire dodges. The commander says, "I try not to use violence. I also have a daughter. Your father taught you good skills that you can still dodge." And Claire says, "I learned this from my brother, not my father. It's true that every time we fight I win, but I learned something new from him every time." The commander says, "I heard about your brother. When you showed signs of possession, he treated you right." Claire rejects this issue, but the commander says, "I need to know more about this brother of yours." At this moment, Claire gets angry and breaks her chains. But the commander is stronger and knocks her unconscious, and says, "It doesn't matter if you don't say anything. When we test your blood we will know what is going on." At this moment, Shadow Garden attacks them and kills all their members. The commander arrives and is surprised that Shadow Garden knows about the Diablos sect and gets into a fight with them. Alpha doesn't want to kill him so that he can get a confession from him, but he takes some pills that make him much stronger. However, he still cannot defeat her and escapes from the basement. Alpha says, "Great, Shadow is going straight to him." We see Shadow in the basement while he seems to have lost his way, but he meets the commander. The commander is surprised to know that he is going that way, but he fights with him to defeat him. Shadow says, "You have more magic power than Alpha, but you don't know how to use it." The commander says, "Did you think you could defeat me? The darkness of this world is very deep, more than you think." And Shadow says, "So I will go to the end of this darkness." And kills him. When the commander dies, he says, "I was powerless against the darkness, but maybe this boy," and dies. We see the commander's necklace, which has a picture of his daughter inside it, and Shadow takes this necklace and leaves. Claire returns home and goes to Midgar as if nothing happened. Kajinu says to himself, "I wish I could go there too. It's a big city." "It's okay, I'll go in 2 years when I'm old enough. Until then I'll work with Alpha and the other girls." At this moment, Alpha calls him and says, "It's time for us to leave you. This is a goodbye." In the next scene, we see Kajinu saying to himself on the train, "Alpha told me that Diablos is a very big sect in the world, and to fight them, we have to spread out with my people in different cities. But I know what he meant. This sect does not exist and we are liberating ourselves. I can't blame them. Not everyone wants to be a hero forever." We see flashbacks to when Kajinu crashed the truck while trying to get magic. Kajinu is 15 years old and goes to Midgar Academy. Kajanu's new place of residence is a class society, and Kajanu tries to remain a minor character as much as possible. That's why he has chosen extremely normal friends. He has lost a bet with his friends, and as punishment, he must propose to the most attractive girl in school, Princess Alexia. And Kajanu tries to do this as much as he can as a secondary character. He proposes a relationship to Princess Alexia, and surprisingly, the princess accepts his proposal. Exactly what Kajanu didn't want. Being the boyfriend of the princess makes him no longer a secondary character. He is discussing with his friends at the lunch table why the princess has accepted his proposal. At that moment, the princess arrives and asks them to join them for lunch. Kajanu tries to make the princess leave him alone, but the princess suggests that they attend a swordsmanship class together. And she says that she has kept a place for him. Zenon Sensei, their instructor, the royal swordsman, introduces Kajanu to the students, then talks about Princess Iris, Alexia's sister, and how she kept the Bushin swordsmanship they use in class alive. Alexia trains with Kajanu while Kajanu analyzes her moves. Alexia's style is extremely simple, but she is very skilled in her movements and has had a lot of training. She tries not to do extra movements as much as possible, but she is still far behind her sister Iris. Alexia says to Kajanu, "Your swordsmanship reminds me of myself, I hate it." We find out that Zenon, the master of swordsmanship, intended to marry Alexia, and it seems that this is the reason why Alexia accepted his proposal. Also, Alexia found out from Kajanu's friends about losing the bet. Kajanu doesn't agree with playing the role of Alexia's boyfriend, but Alexia offers him money, and since he needs capital to become Eminence of the Shadow, Kajanu accepts this wholeheartedly. Fortunately, everyone was more concerned with the fact that Alexia had a boyfriend than who Kajanu was, and Kajanu could continue to be a side character. Princess Alexia is very polite in public, but she is actually full of bad features. And she hates Zenon. Kajanu says, but Zenon really has no problem. He is good looking, he is resistant and famous, and he is also rich. And Alexia answers, that's exactly the problem, he's pretending, just like I'm doing. I don't judge people by their appearance like you. Kajanu asks, so what do you judge? And Alexia answers, flaws. And Zenon's problem is that he has no flaws, we don't have perfect people, so such a person must be a big liar. 2 weeks have passed. Alexia says to Kajanu on the train, your swordsmanship is still a mystery to me. You know the basics well, but there is nothing else. I hate it. Kajanu asks, did something happen today? Your swordsmanship was very sloppy. Alexia answers, I always wanted to be as good as my sister, but I'm not like her. I tried to strengthen what I am, but look where my work has led me now. Do you know what they call me? Normal swordsman, says Kajanu. And he says there's nothing wrong with it, I like your fencing. Alexia says, my sister said this to me before when I had a terrible loss at the Bushin festival. She could never understand how humiliated I felt. Kajanu says, I don't care if 1,000,000 people die on the other side of the world. But there are things that bother me, for example, when people consider things worthless, they are the most valuable things in life for me. That's why I love your swordplay. Alexia gets angry, pulls a sword on Kajanu and asks, what do you mean? And Kajanu replies, nothing, I just don't want you to say bad things about the things I love. And while the train guard sees this scene, Alexia says goodbye and leaves. Tomorrow, while Kajanu was discussing with his friend that his relationship is over, that the soldiers stopped Kajanu and informed him that Princess Alexia had been missing since last night. And Kajanu is the main suspect as the last person who was with him. In the next scene, we see Princess Alexia locked in a cell with a strange creature with anti-magic chains. A crazy doctor enters the cell and keeps saying, royal blood. He takes blood from Alexia to rebuild the demon. The soldiers are torturing Kajanu, but Kajanu endures the physical pain because this torture makes him feel like an NPC. While Alexia is losing consciousness, she says to herself, my sister must have started looking for me by now. And she wants the doctor to take less of her blood to stay alive. The doctor, who wants more and more blood, does the same thing, forcefully feeds Alexia, and says, it's all the fault of those idiots. If they didn't destroy my lab, I would have finished my research. I have to finish them or I will be exiled. Then he hits that strange creature. In the next scene, Zenon is giving the search report to find Alexia to Princess Iris. He says, now our main target is Kajanu, but considering his level, he will never be able to defeat Alexia, and after 5 days, he still hasn't said anything, and Princess Iris wants to release Kajanu and secretly monitor him. Iris doesn't know what to do, even though she is stronger than all the knights, but because she is a princess, she is a target for the enemies and she can't go to the fights by herself. Meanwhile, Kajinu's sister shouts in the school, "Free my brother." It is not possible for him to have stolen anyone. Iris says to herself, "We used to understand each other through swordplay, but now I don't remember when was the last time we talked." The soldiers free Kajinu, but they follow him and watch him. On the way back, Kajinu sees Alpha and he brings the soldiers' intervention. Alpha has heard that Kajinu is in trouble and has come to his aid. Kajinu says to himself, "I'm sure they are all living their lives freely and sometimes they visit me to please me." Alpha says to Kajinu, "Come to yourself, this is how you will be found guilty. Diablo has infiltrated the knights and we have to act quickly. It was Diablo who stole the princess. Alexia is alive and they are drawing blood from her. I know that you were making love with the princess because of your responsibility. But I wish you would trust us more." Alpha continues, "Rest, we will inform you when we are ready. What should we do with 2 interrogators?" And Kajinu answers, "Don't do anything to them, they were just doing their job properly." Kajinu is preparing himself for another show with the expensive items he bought this time. The Eminence of the Shadow Collection. Beta arrives and is surprised by the greatness of Shadow. He informs, "We gathered 114 crew members inside the capital and they are ready for the mission. The goal of this is to have successive attacks on the known hideouts of the Diablo cult to find the princess. Alpha and I lead the forces inside, and Delta is also in the front line and signals the start of the operation." Kajinu says, "Apologies to Delta, but I will take the front line. Tonight, the world will know us." The soldiers are talking about the operation. When they see Kajinu, they throw Alexia's boot at him and say, "If you only talked, you could have made things a lot easier. You have the princess boot, so we have to arrest you again." But Kajinu kills those soldiers and all the watchers with the help of his group. And the beta notes everything in the meantime. The shadow group destroys any suspected Diablo hideout and this incident worries the knights. Iris decides to go to the front line herself. The doctor, who found the shadow team's hiding place, decides to do the experiment right now. And by injecting royal blood into that creature, it turns it into a big and mutated creature. But the creature whose memories have not been forgotten kills the doctor at the first opportunity and frees Alexia. The princess wants to run away when she meets Xenon. Xenon says, "This building is mine. I used to fund that man's research." Alexia says, "Great. I always knew you had a problem." Xenon says, "It doesn't matter, with your blood I can get promoted to the 12th seat of the Round Table and stop being a ridiculous swordsman teacher." The Round Table is a group of 12 of the most professional swordsmen who have a lot of money and fame. Xenon says, "Your sister was better, but I have to be satisfied with your blood. You will never be better than ordinary." And this makes Alexia angry. But Xenon defeats Alexia. At this moment, Shadow, a man lurking in the shadows, comes.